So the rainfall outlook. So this is hot off the press, which is one of the reasons why I was a little bit late, 5 minutes late, because I was waiting for the data process, but it basically has just come in, thank God. The climate data has been incredibly late and laggy lately, so it's been quite poor actually. But thankfully, it actually got its act together today, and so this is as of fresh yesterday. So currently the SOI is sitting at 3.67 for 30 days, which is basically dead on in cool neutral, and has been that way now for a couple of weeks, as you can see on the graph. It has recovered from the end of May, where it was actually into negative territory, which is interesting because that does, as I said a few months ago, it looks like the Enzo is actually recharging for a potential La Nina at the end of this year, although it will not be a long one or a strong one. It'll be probably a short, sharp burst. So I'm not convinced yet at this stage we'll see much influence from it, but we'll see. But there is definitely, I think, in the books, a La Nina coming. And then I think that will discharge the Enzo basin quite significantly. And then we will see what comes in terms of the end of 2026. And I think at this stage it's probably going to be a El Nino. Given that all things being equal, normally we sort of have the reverse pattern, but we'll see. And as I said, the SOI trend has been down. Of course, don't forget that is based on 30 days. So 30 days ago, it was into, if you look into the graph here, it was into that sort of mid-positive territory. So I think that'll start to flatten out to stable very soon, because it's been pretty stable here. You can see in terms of basically, since I said, as the end of May, being above zero. And pretty much flatlined, as has everything else. The 30-day SOI, as you can see, or so the 90-day SOI has basically pretty much flatlined as well, down from its reasonable sort of strong values in the early April. It's basically been chowing along at that sort of 3 to 4 value for quite a while now. So indicating again that there's no real driving pattern from the Enzo at this stage. And all leftover moisture that we had sort of in that April period, where we had a bit of a burst there of rainfall, has now been discharged and washed out. And really, we're now in the area of SAM, and SAM is what is driving us at the moment. And SAM is consistently positive. And the latest figures today are up to plus 2.6, which is sad that this actually hasn't updated. I'm actually going to grab that offline for you, because it's 2.6 today, which is strongly positive now, really starting to get out. And that is going to drive the weather for a few days. Don't forget, in winter, when you get a positive SAM values, you're looking at suppressed rainfall. As you can see here in my little climate center, you can see here the SAM is actually a drier trend. And 2.63, you can see here in the latest data, is quite strongly positive. And it does bounce along quite a lot ever since I've been monitoring it. You can see here the SAM is the greeny color line. You can see up and down, but you notice there's quite a consistent pattern. So you look back in the period of May when we had those record rainfalls, the SAM dropped quite strongly into negative territory, into reasonable negative territory, and that is definitely indicative of a more winterish pattern, because normally autumn, that SAM doesn't really have any real effect. But you can see here that had quite a strong effect, and that's what it's sort of says that the patterns are like a month ahead of itself. So we really saw a June pattern in May, and that's reflected in the SAM values as well. So because there was nothing else driving that event that we saw, like the Enzo was dead, it was actually negative. So and IOD was positive, so it's not providing any moisture. So the only real drive you can really point to is the sea surface temperatures, which were used by SAM. And quite clearly there, it was definitely the driver responsible for that event, that coastal trough. And you can see quickly how quickly it rebounded, and we've had that dry spell ever since then. You can see quite clearly it got down again into sort of just briefly into negative territories, but when we had those couple of sort of showery sort of tribes, but nothing much for us. And again, of course, that's indicative also of the wetter patterns into our west too, and those sort of cold fronts that sneak up. So the sort of blips up and down here are quite indicative of shortwave fronts, troughs that I've been talking to you about. And these sort of longer, these big cleft type ones is a long wave trough, and that was definitely what caused the combination that long wave trough is very much reflective of that active SAM. And again, you can see here these quite strong peaks, and then you can see, which is, they're quite strong ridges, and then these massive drops, which is these troughs coming through. So you can, if you go back and you can see, you'll be able to pinpoint, a trough around there, good cold front around their trough, and you can see sort of around here where you had, that colder outbreak, again, only like a week or so, 10 days ago. We don't get much out of it, of course, because of the drying effect, but the Western Blue Mountains, the Great, up Great Dividing Range, that stuff, do definitely get better. Sort of, you can see these little short, sharp ups and downs. But you can see this gradual rise again out of that way up into the positive territory. And again, of course, that will go up to 2.6, which is up here, which is, way up above that. And yeah, interesting. I don't know why it says positive SAM. Positive SAM is 1, not way up there. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Better check that, legend. And you can see otherwise, IOD is the purple line, flat line, like my heart after a couple of drinks. And you can see the SCI, which is our Southern Climate Index, which is the thing I've developed, quite actually accurately maps the activity, and it's actually working out really quite strongly. And you can see here, that wet period in April we had strongly there, and you can see again the effects of that area in trough. You can see how strongly the SCI got up into almost plus 20 for a monthly value, which is really, that's actually says extreme wet, and we had extreme wet, and really happy actually how it's actually mapping out. And of course you can see here it then plummets into these territories, and this is sort of like average to low to moderate suppressed. And you can see here it's down into the drier, tending down into very dry and extreme dry, and extreme dry actually kicks in I think at 10 or 9 at the SI, and the SCI this afternoon was 10. So you can see it's almost in that extreme dry category, and it's not so unsurprising how dry it's been, to be honest. And again, that is not, it's not catching us unawares too. As I said, you got to balance out what happened in May. May was extremely wet, so got to bring balance to the force, and that's what it's doing at the moment. Otherwise, everything else is pretty flatlined actually. But so this week again, even though there's some showers coming through, it does say it's drier all around. Unfortunately, those changes will be filtered out by the Blue Mountains and Great Dividing Range. We won't see much out of them. Even again, that rain on Tuesday, I don't expect much out of it. It'll be cold, and it'll probably be, it'd be nice when it does come, but it won't be maybe a mil, maybe 2 mils, maybe 3 mils max. So, and the trend, of course, of the SCI has been down quite significantly. No surprises there, given this time of year. Most climate drivers are, as I said, responsive to the SAM, what the SAM does, bounce around. But generally speaking, since that great peak back in mid-May, it has been a downward progression significantly. And I don't expect that to change just yet, although there is some indication that we may see it kick up in July, so fingers crossed for that. But again, the season outlook at this stage is still drier, and we'll see what the next 2 weeks goes in terms of that. But looking at the overall pictures and what's happening down to our south over Antarctica, there's not a lot stirring at the moment. It says to me it's going to actually massively kick the SAM back into negative territory, which is where we really want to see it for this time of year, to allow those cold fronts to sort of penetrate more. Actually, what it does is actually pushes the cold fronts down to the south and allows those more easterly surges of moisture, which is what gives us decent rain events. The fronts moving further north is great for southern Australia and the snowies, of course, because it then allows that really deep cold air to come through with some southern moisture. As I said, and I've said a number of times, that's not much good for us because it actually does get filtered out by the Blue Mountains and we miss out. And that is the breaks for us in most winter events, unfortunately.